Welcome to you all. My name is Andrew Chung, artistic producer and violinist with London Symphonia, and we are just on the cusp of heading into our opening concert, our season opening concert. And this is with Tchaikovsky's Sixth Symphony and Scott Good's Trumpet Concerto Between the Rooms. And of course, we're welcoming Scott to join us for a chat today. Hello, Scott.
Hi, Andrew. Hi, everyone.
So glad you could join me. And we're
Thank
going
you.
to cover, all things Tchaikovsky and all things Scott Good in this Behind the Music. So let's dive right in. So Tchaikovsky's sixth and final symphony. Um, I'm under the impression it's one of your favorites.
Yes.
Just tell us why do you think Tchaikovsky is so iconic and beloved and what shows up in this symphony of those?
Sure. I think, of any piece of his, if you wanted to show the full range of what Tchaikovsky can do, the symphony would be an excellent example. What makes Tchaikovsky so beloved? I mean, I guess starting from being an orchestra musician myself is the actual way that he writes for an orchestra. Most players, when you play a Tchaikovsky symphony, although you might be sweating bullets at the end, it's a very, very satisfying experience. And being a trombonist, not every composer was necessarily so kind to us, but he wrote wonderful trombone parts. So that was kind of an immediate attachment. Just the beautiful sounds and the power that he can get out of an orchestra is astounding.
Mhm.
Of course, Tchaikovsky's known for his incredible melodies, his incredible sense of romantic emotion. So not only does he combine this incredible orchestration, but he pairs it with some great, memorable melodies. But he's also a composer who explores in his pieces, and that's one thing that I love so much about his Sixth Symphony. Melodies become torn apart in development and broken apart into different little motives that then that he plays with in the orchestra. And I think at any level of a listener, and maybe this is another thing that's so great about Tchaikovsky, no matter if you're a beginning listener, if you don't know a lot about classical music, when you hear, say something like the Nutcracker Suite, it has an immediate impact. But as an experienced classical musicians, we love his music because the more and more you experience it, the more and more you realize his incredible, composing ability and, just pure genius to just create memorable scores.
Yeah, he leaves nothing lacking in the
No.
live concert experience, that's for sure. So there's
Yeah.
no doubt that it's an emotional outpouring, right? And I think many commentators over time thought that it was maybe predicting his death, which happened just a few days after he conducted the premiere. But I think that
Oh,
that's been largely debunked. But
all
what
right.
makes this symphony emotional? Maybe more than his others. What makes it emotional from a musical standpoint? So how does he manipulate sound to create this tragic or emotional effect?
Right. Um, I guess one thing about this piece is that he really takes it to the extreme. Like the first movement is maybe even for me my favorite part of the whole piece is this long journey that goes from these incredibly sweet melancholic melodies to this almost violent, aggressive orchestrations that come up later as the music becomes allegro and resulting in some tremendous tutti. And then at the very end, though, at the very end, one of the most special part of the symphony is the ending of the first movement. He just caps the whole piece with this beautiful, simple little statement of the main theme.
Mm.
And there's something just so touching about it. I find it really incredible. And then, of course, then we go into the second movement and we have this whole new character, a whole new idea, this beautiful waltz. I mean, I call it a waltz. I guess maybe that's a controversial title because we tend to think of waltzes in three time, but this is, or six, but this is actually in five time.
Yeah.
So there's sort of five beats for each phrase rather than six or three, which you would normally have in a waltz. So it's like da 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 dee da bam. And to me, it feels like it's almost like I can't believe all waltzes aren't written in five after hearing the way he did it. It has this beautiful lilt built
He's
into
got
the,
a amazing
yeah,
ability to make it swing, just the way his other
yeah,
waltzes in three swing. And I mean, you might be tapping the pulse at times, but you can definitely find the three within the five
yeah.
at times, and you feel that momentum. It's magic, though. It's just stunning. Yeah,
It's magical. It is stunning. Yeah. And it's something that intrigues me so much as a composer myself that you can create something that is in one way so abstract yet sounds so natural. So
yeah.
it's a remarkable thing.
And that, I
Yeah,
mean, going, but even that first movement, right? To
yeah,
me, that feels complete. That's complete storytelling. It has this
yeah,
wonderful arc,
yeah,
and then we're only done the first movement. I mean,
yeah.
I get even lost at the form of the thing. I mean, is that clear to you, or like, do you think that he's really just storytelling?
Yeah, I think he's storytelling. And actually, I was thinking about a first movement, and maybe we'll discuss how it actually kind of relates to my own trumpet concerto's first movement. And often, composers, I was trying to think of some other good examples. Maybe Beethoven's Third Symphony is a good example, where the first movement is actually almost like a whole piece onto its own with this large form, and that goes many places, and it feels sort of unsettled in a way, like there's this constant searching going on. And then interestingly, the next three movements of the Sixth Symphony are much more contained within each movement, as in they have a contained idea. This is a waltz, this is the march, this is the adagio.
Mhm.
Whereas in the first movement, we get the fast allegros, we get the slow adagios, we get the big tutti, we get the tiny chamber music moments, we get the intimate melodies, we get the epic brass laden melodies. So it's sort of like, yeah, it's almost like a complete piece. And you could almost think of the first movement as part one, and then we move on to part two, which is actually the next three movements, which all sort
Yes.
of, move along. Yeah.
Absolutely. And then it's like he reverses your standard third and fourth movement, right? And you get that
Yeah.
zippy march with this motor moving all the time underneath
Yeah.
that builds to a massive climax. And how in the
Yeah.
world Daniel's going to stifle applause, or whether he will bother to try that at all, who
Yes,
knows?
I think that very often when you end the third movement, and we will see, but it's often the conductor will ask the orchestra to move very quickly on to the next movement, so that that space is very short, which I think is quite effective because the opening of that fourth movement, even though it's an adagio and a slow piece, is actually this burst of like a emotion that sort of like almost feels like it just comes out of all this energy that's been built up in the third movement. I think it's quite a remarkable moment, actually.
Mhm.
Beautiful string writing there too. Just when you get into the nuts and bolts of how he scores the adagio, there's some really, really interesting tone painting he does between, say, the violas and the violins and the way they pass the melody back and forth. And it creates this really magical, lugubrious kind of texture.
Hmm. Well, let's
Yeah.
let's get a little bit technical. We've got a real live composer here.
Yeah,
So,
sorry.
uh, no apologies needed, of course. So, like, tell me what have you learned from Tchaikovsky as a composer? He's one of your faves, and tell me like a couple things that you've learned from Tchaikovsky as a composer.
Yeah, sure. Well, as we discussed before, that sense of drama, um, going back to the first movement, for instance, it there's the beautiful melody comes in and it gets quieter and quieter and basically coming down to the quietest clarinet solo you could possibly imagine. And then suddenly it bursts with energy, the whole orchestra coming in, the strings tremoloing. So Tchaikovsky is great for these moments of great drama, something I really like in my music. I'm very inspired by his orchestration. I love how he uses all the different orchestra colors and puts them together in interesting combinations. And maybe something unusual like having a bassoon and a flute play together in unison,
Hmm.
or sometimes with the winds joining the strings on big melodies. And he also, uses wind instruments and strings and really interesting background rhythmic figures. So those are like he creates so much motion and energy without even say using percussion, which maybe other composers would use, using the strings and the winds. That's a huge influence on me for sure.
Yeah, you
And
get your strings and winds involved in the motor and the rhythms, your 5/8, your 7/8, that sort of thing.
yeah,
Well,
yeah,
I mean, you're a trombonist, so
yeah.
and I feel that you do brass and low brass so well, but I couldn't articulate what makes that successful. And I hear it in Tchaikovsky too. The way that he approaches the brass sections is just so successful. I mean, can you comment on that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, playing a Tchaikovsky symphony, you feel like as a wind player, as a trombone player, and I'd be playing a specific chair, you feel like you're really a part of something special. And he always gives you these little moments. I really feel that there's some intentionality in it, not just for just to score well, but it almost seems like he wants to give little gifts to the wind players, these little solos, little textural moments, maybe play with the cellos for a few bars and this sort of thing. So you really feel as a brass player like you are a part of the whole sound. And that's definitely something that's really important to me as a composer. So I do have a strong tendency to like to find ways that I can include brass in my scores. And I'm sure Tchaikovsky is a part of that, but also my own experience of, not every piece I've played is maybe so exciting where you're sitting and resting a lot and not participating. So Tchaikovsky is just great for that. And I try and make my scores a lot of fun for the winds and the brass. So that might be one thing that has influenced my writing. And something else I would mention is often when I'm talking in circles of composers and they find out I'm a brass player, they're like, "Oh, you're so lucky." I find the brass instruments really foreign and they don't understand them maybe so well, so they hold back from writing for them. Whereas since I played the instrument and studied it and listened to so many great players, my hearing for the instrument, my ideas for the instrument are quite wide and broad. So using trombones and brass in quieter sections or maybe some mutes, I might tend to use those colors more often than other composers might.
I love that notion of you're composing to give little gifts to individual players. And I know that we've talked before that when you're composing, you have the if you're composing a new piece, for instance, you're thinking about who's sitting in that chair and you're thinking
Yeah,
about that particular instrumentalist and how he or she performs. And you're imagining that person playing these little solos or these little background burbly bits. And
yeah,
I wonder, if Tchaikovsky also was thinking in that way, right? So
yeah,
to think so that no, like it's satisfying for everyone playing in the orchestra when they play this Tchaikovsky symphony.
yeah,
And just thinking with such intention. I wonder if he was thinking of individual players and this
yeah,
notion of gifts, little Easter eggs that just
yeah. Yeah, maybe it was like his buddies in the orchestra, and he wanted to have let them have some fun. I'm sure that there was probably a part of it, and then just the love of the color, just to want to paint with many, many different colors.
hmm. And
Yeah,
that's okay. So let's segue into trumpet land here. So I think that so Tchaikovsky, he must have a concept in terms of the role of the trumpet, and you and your concerto, obviously you've got ideas about the role of the trumpet. Tell me about that a bit.
yeah, sure. The trumpet has always been one of my favorite instruments to listen to as in the solo. In particular, I used to listen to Wynton Marsalis recordings. He's one of my favorite players. And of course, it plays many different styles, which is really cool. It plays jazz music really well, plays classical music. It's an ancient instrument. It's even mentioned in the Bible. So the trumpet to me has so many things going for it because first it can play such a beautiful lyric sound. It's so rich and so detailed in the expressiveness, the kinds of legato and smoothness. But of course, trumpet is maybe even more known for its fanfare-like qualities, where it can play very strong with a hard kind of sound and articulation and really carry. So in Tchaikovsky's works, the lead trumpet often plays a very crucial role at the climaxes of the pieces. I'm thinking actually now I'm going to just switch to another symphony, but the Fifth Symphony in particular ends with an absolutely soaring trumpet melody carrying above the orchestra. So this concerto, when I was thinking of writing it, I was actually specifically thinking about a trumpet player who is the principal player in an orchestra and brings that kind of skill set. You know, like a principal trumpet of the orchestra is going to have a way of playing where they can actually play with such power that they can carry over the whole a melody over the whole orchestra or a fanfare to create that excitement. And I'm thinking, let's take that energy and now put it on front of the stage and then have that sound soaring out directly to the audience for and explore in a whole composition those qualities.
Hmm. So, your piece, it's in three parts, and it
Yeah.
goes seamlessly. And that first part, like, there's definitely storytelling going on. There's this poetic element to your piece. It's called Between the Rooms.
Yes.
And when I first heard that it was inspired by the Dickinson poem "I Died for Beauty," I was just wondering if the outer movements were maybe beauty and truth, and somewhere in the middle, in the middle part, they met and they had a
Right.
conversation. But so tell me, is there poetic material going on in your head for those outer movements, or is it really confined to just that middle movement?
Well, the term, the word between the rooms, to I was thinking of that those are two rooms, and I guess they are truth and beauty, but they were that middle movement, and it always does places because the outer movements are fast and involved, whereas the middle movement's this beautiful moment of lyricism that sustains for a while, and it's a very sort of central emotional quality. So that is the between the rooms that's happening in that middle movement. And then the actual sort of subject of the poem, this conversation happening between truth and beauty, I was kind of inspired to actually think of the truth concept as being the trumpet. The trumpet announces, it declares truth, right? And then the beauty is the orchestra that surrounds that truth. And in this movement, I actually give a big moment for the orchestra to play this very big, beautiful melody. And then the trumpet plays its more truthful like melody coming in afterwards. And then there's a series of a sort of a long escapade where there's these conversations that go between the trumpet and the flute and the trumpet and the clarinets and the trumpet and the strings. And so there's all these little conversations that go on that I was imagining where these kinds of conversations truth and beauty might have.
Beautiful. And that the first part and the storytelling, I do hear jazz elements in there, and you
Sure.
mentioned Wynton Marsalis, and I mean, is there a particular jazz era that you think of, or like, I don't know, I'm just curious.
Yeah, sure. Well, it's interesting for the jazz thing. For certain like kind of lyric qualities, and now I'm thinking of a trumpeter like Chet Baker, so that kind of like very lyric, songbook, syrupy, expressive kind of jazzy tone with those kinds of chords.
Mhm.
I'm also, and especially now with this, like when looking at it with the whole orchestra, I'm actually a huge fan, True Confessions, of Henry Mancini. I used to listen to Henry Mancini a lot when I was a kid, and I think it really got into my head. So you get those big, thick, brassy chords and that sort of thing, big tooties. So that kind of jazz sound definitely creeps into my music.
It's such an attractive quality. I love those chords that you bring in there. And yeah, when you say Henry Mancini, absolutely, I hear that. That's awesome.
Yeah, cool.
The part three, I mean, no Scott Good composition would be complete
Right.
without a a good rhythmic, section. And here we've got that 5/8 meter,
Yeah.
it's that motor. It keeps going and it kind of topples forward, right? With that
Yeah.
uneven. But I mean, in your hands, it just seems very effortless, and hopefully the orchestra can play it effortlessly.
Yes, for sure. Tricky stuff, indeed. Yeah. I don't know what to say. Ever since I first came in contact with sort of mixed metered music, music in 5 or 7 unusual kinds of meters, I just fell in love with them. And as a player, I've spent a fair bit of time, not just in, say, contemporary music where it's used, but say, Balkan music, Balkan folk music. So there's different kinds of musics that use these more unusual, they're just unusual to us. In other places, they're actually quite normal.
Mhm,
So I've had experience sort of playing in those musics where you get to a point where you are actually feeling it almost like it's in 4/4 time,
mhm.
where it feels very natural. I
But
do
the
spend a lot
what
of, yeah, sorry,
but
go ahead.
what also is going on with that meter is there's a
Mhm.
much more chaotic feeling in that part three
Yeah,
to my ear.
yeah,
It's like
for
it's a
sure.
it's a little on edge, a little danger, danger, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's meant to be a bit chaotic. It's meant to be kind of fun, a bit bacchanalian, a bit wild.
Yeah.
And it does kind of spin out of control at times, but kind of brings it all back together, like right at the end of the piece. So the third part begins and goes for quite some time in 5 and 7, and
Mhm.
different kinds of time signatures with lots of changes of textures and accents and these sorts of things. But finally, it comes back at the very end and brings back the initial theme at the beginning, which is in the 4/4 time, and sort of brings the whole work to a close, back to its sort of initial fanfare like quality. So there's kind of a dialogue. I think of it this way too, that you have this section in the uneven meter, and then it sort of it relaxes then back into the 4/4 time.
Hmm. And so when you think back to when you were composing this piece, how did you know it was done? Like, at what point
Yeah.
did how did you assemble this and how did you know you were done?
Whew. I mean, I did write the piece 17 years ago, so I'm trying to remember, but I don't. And it's sort of a story that never changes. When is it done? I mean, there's the deadline, so it has to be done by a certain point. It is tricky though because I'm very I like to tinker a lot with my scores and rethink orchestrations, and it can be tricky too writing a piece. This is about a 26, 27 minute long piece, so once I feel like I have the whole piece written, I reflect back now and think, does each section work within the context of this larger scope? And I have been known to cut some things out or add a few bits at the ends. Um, so that process, I think it's just when I get to that point when I can't find anything wrong with it, that's when it's done,
You
And so
keep
it's time
going and
to,
going. And there were some
yeah,
very, very minor changes made for this particular performance too, right? So,
yes.
I mean, that's the benefit of revisiting a work. You can
Yeah.
modify one of your children.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Oh, that sounds kind of funny the way you're saying it there. But it is interesting because I did write the piece 17 years ago, and I love it. It's one of my favorite pieces, and so there's not in my revisions weren't really anything drastic. I didn't want to change much about the piece, but a few things in particular that I'll just quickly mention came to mind. One was actually the very technical issue of the scoring and writing it out in the notation.
Mhm.
So I've had 17 years of practice to get better at my skills in notating. And so there's part of me just want to recopy the piece so that it looked much nicer and the parts were cleaner and more professional looking. So that was a motivation.
Well,
And
let's not skip over
yeah,
that point because that's
yeah,
actually quite
okay,
interesting, right? So
sure.
you've got these parts in a score in the computer in a program, and
That's right.
then you copy it and put it into individual parts for each orchestra musician. But
Yeah.
if you just go splat, there's going to be chaos for that individual player, right? Like it has to be well thought out where the page
Hmm.
turns are, for instance,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
the sizing and the
Yeah.
layout. That's what you
Yes.
mean, right? By cleaning up the copy.
Yeah. And then, I mean, getting kind of technical, but you can, when the software extracts the part from the score, but it doesn't do it all perfectly. So it's getting in there with the the magnifying glass and looking very closely that all the little notations, all the little markings are well paced and look really nice. The computer's great. I mean, it's kind of like artificial intelligence. It does a lot for you, but I'm pickier than the computer. I like it. I actually spend quite a bit of time on each part, making sure that they're very satisfactory and, as you said, the right size. You don't want people to have to squint to look at the part, and good page turns and all these kinds of aspects that just make the journey for the performer much more enjoyable, which is so important to me as a composer. I really just want my players to be having a great time while they're playing the music.
Agreed, agreed. And I'm
Yeah.
sure we will. I'm so looking forward to this opening night concert. We're October the 5th, and this will be conducted by Daniel Bartholomew Poyser. We're delighted to invite him back to join London Symphonia. We'll be starting our concert with Scott Good's Trumpet Concerto Between the Rooms and the second half, Tchaikovsky's epic Symphony Number 6. Thank you so much for joining me today, Scott, to talk about this
Thank you.
concert.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, Andrew.